And now I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Vanessa Gray.
Thank you, Rebecca. Welcome, everyone, to our September DLIS discussion. Today, we're going to shine a spotlight on the essential role Florida libraries play in supporting and honoring the stories of veterans in our communities. And also, DLIS discussions are basically discussion starters. We have a topic, but it can go in any direction. So feel free to share anything that's going on in your libraries. But initially, we're get the conversation started about veterans resources and programs that you all are doing in your great libraries. We encourage every participant to share any of your stories, best practices, or discuss how your library honors and uplifts veterans. We are especially honored to welcome three guests from our library and archival community and the Department of Arts and Culture. First, we have Kim Odom. She is the branch manager of the Ponte Vedra Beach Branch Library in St. Johns County Public Library System. With over 20 years of experience spanning youth and teen services, adult reference, circulation, and management, Kim is a recent Sunshine State Library Leadership Institute graduate. She's a champion of lifelong learning, passionate about connecting people to resources and fostering community partnerships. And next, we have one of our own in our DLS family, Matthew Storey. He's an archives historian at the State Archives of Florida. He will be sharing our resources with you. And then we will have Julian Duncan. He's the program administrator of the Florida Veterans History Program in the the Department of Arts and Culture. Julian is a PhD candidate, or maybe he's finished already, but in musicology, which is awesome, longtime researcher, and he is an advocate for public history and veterans oral histories. So, Kim, would you like to start?
Good afternoon. So on behalf of our director, I can be heard okay?
Yes, you're
All right.
good.
Our director, Deborah Gibson, and our entire St. Johns County family and team, I appreciate this opportunity to share with you what we've been doing here in Northeast Florida in support of our veteran and service community. As a daughter, granddaughter, and great-granddaughter of veterans from the Marines, Coast Guard, and Army, I am both proud and nervous in this moment. So bear with me as sometimes I'm going to look down. But thank you. I'm just going to give you a snapshot of what we have done in the past and then a quick timeline of our latest project, which we are very proud of. So some things we've done in the past include arts and crafts related events that we've done in partnership or in tandem with our Parks and Recreation Department. So utilizing our human resources and also our other resources and ways that we can market across two different departments has been helpful for us in the past. Also, when we hosted a small business day, we had a panel and an information fair. We made sure that the small business administration brought along with them someone who specifically worked with veteran owned businesses so that they could target that community, help them with contracts, and help them with training for those specialized services. But on to our latest initiative, which began last spring. It's hard to believe uh, just only about 5 months ago. One of our volunteers, shout out to the volunteers who are our community and really help us to grow as a library. Our volunteers shared information about the Veterans Museum. So the Veterans Museum is an online museum which launched about a year ago. And I know that that link is going to be shared in the chat. But among several other things, they educate the public by preserving stories of veterans and making those stories available to the public through their platform online, also through use of the kiosks, and they also share those stories back to the veterans family and to the Library of Congress. Well, after reading more on our own about them and their projects, we were reached out to from the Veterans Museum, and I asked our library director if it was an opportunity that we could explore here on the branch level or on the county level. Permission is always better than sacrifice. So getting that permission from our leadership was important to do right from the very start, and she was on board. So excited about it. She also encouraged that we should see if our library advisory board um, uh, member, who is part of this district that I serve in, would be interested because he is a veteran as well. And he was. So our library advisory board member and I met with representatives from the Veterans Museum in Jacksonville, just our neighbor to the north. And we got a chance to see the kiosk in action, to try it out. It was sleek in design and easy to use. And then, wait, there was more. We were able to go, and they had a studio set up for where interviews could be done with veterans right there on site. The machine allows you to be able to request an interview, but right there in the on the fourth floor, I believe, of the Jacksonville Library, they also had a studio set up, so that was really nice. Our director said in the past, we did have a Veterans History Project, and it was in partnership with the Veterans Council and the Council on Aging. We did have another Sunshine State Leadership, Library Leadership alum who was part of that whole process as well. And so that project was not a project we were going to be able to revive, but this was a nice next phase, celebrating stories. I'm going to take a breath. All right. So now that we had our stakeholders on board, it took just a few weeks to kind of get us all back in one place and get our technology team on board, because there were going to be some technical aspects that we were going to need to take care of with the use of the essentially the computer in our building. And of course, this is a machine that was going to make noise in a quiet library. So we needed to get across some of those hurdles. And frankly, the thing that took the longest amount of time was getting an MOU through our county, through legal department. And I was impressed with this whole relationship. Everybody had their minds focused on how can we serve the public? How can we be a better agent of change and share more stories? So fast forward, August the 13th, the kiosk was installed, and we've had really good feedback. Since then, it's right in our main lobby. So as you walk into our building, you cannot miss it. It is not too loud at all. It has special infrared technology, which allows for the user who's right in front of it to hear. But if you're standing off to the right or left of it, you won't hear it. And so everybody who's come in contact with it has had a good time. We hear that there have been 134 sessions since installation, and our users have viewed 593 pages. Those are those individual interviews. So the interviews themselves last less than 3 minutes, so like an old school phone call that's really quick. And some of them make you laugh, some of them make you feel a little somber. I've had situations where kiddos have touched something and then they stay because the story is quite interesting to them. So young and old have enjoyed it. There was even a gentleman who said, "Hey, I know that guy." So we are building community right in our lobby. And I'm very proud of this partnership and where it could lead. We do have a renovation coming up, so our building is going to be a little noisy where we have a meeting room, but I hope that in the future, our library branch and other library branches will be able to host interviews, just like the kiosk in Jacksonville. If a user taps on the register button there, they can sign up to get an interview done for themselves as well. I think I covered everything, so I'm going to be proud of myself in this moment.
And that you should be. You did a great job. Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. So, does anyone have any questions for Kim? Either you can come off mute or you can post in the chat.
I know can you hear me?
Yes, Mark.
Yeah, I know, Kim, you had said that some of the kiddos would stop and hit that, and I was wondering about that. So obviously some of the stories are going to be somber, and I assume though they don't get, they're all okay for people to view, not a lot of salty language and stuff like that. Probably what's the content wise? Thank you.
Thank you. So I've heard less than a dozen. I don't want to skew the results of the kiosk, but nothing I've heard is something that would, only be adult content. I know that the kiosk at the Jacksonville Library was on what would be considered an adult reference floor, and ours is right in the front where the public is. I can certainly ask the Veterans Museum about how they choose which clip to put there, but certainly I haven't had any complaints from anybody at this point.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Thanks. I've got the website up too, so there's probably info down here too. Thank you.
Absolutely.
And Julie Seeks puts in the chat, do you have any lessons learned?
Yeah. So we did have a few business cards beside the kiosk because we don't have anything beside the kiosk advertising. Libraries like signs everywhere. But so the kiosk itself is the sign that says like, touch me, touch here. When we had business cards beside the sign, those got taken really quickly. So now we just have a small blow up flyer of how to contact the museum beside it. So maybe us giving some direction. When I stood in the hallway, we recently did a flag raising ceremony one morning for our new flag, and we had a scout troop out to help us with that, and they retired the old flag. After that event, I was standing in the hallway and I was sort of directing people in that way, and that was a really good opportunity, but I can't do that every day. So probably some signage that says, it's okay, really, do touch the screen.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right. We're going to move to our next guest, homegrown. Matthew, if you want to start.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Once again, my name's Matthew Storey. I'm the historian here at the State Archives of Florida. And I'm here today to talk about a lot of the resources that we have here at the State Archives, and especially online on floridamemory.com. And where the archives come into this discussion, talking about, as Kim is at the library recording live stories from veterans. The archives are going to help us fill in some stories, maybe of veterans in your community who are no longer living, or indeed, in a lot of cases, lived before electronic recording was possible. And indeed, we do see, Kim, you yourself mentioned, there are a lot of families in Florida for which there is a tradition of military service. And so some of our records can help maybe to situate, even amid an active tradition of service, go a little further back into that. So to that end, I'm going to share some resources on floridamemory.com. Now, Florida Memory is the State Archives of Florida's digital outreach program. Let me get a few numbers out of the way before we dive into our specific subject matter today. The State Archives of Florida, is the repository for all the primary source records of Florida's state government. We collect outside of that specialty as well. All told, there are more than 50,000 cubic feet of records here in our building. That is a whole lot. Florida Memory is a tool for us to make a selection of those a whole lot more accessible than an archival collection would typically be, which would require more often than not an in-person visit. So Florida Memory, we're up to about 500,000 items on the website. That still represents less than 1% of the total holdings. So the first thing I want to show you here is we have, and this is actually very new. There is, to my knowledge, only a single collection we've accessioned that would go on this guide since we published it. So we have a complete guide to military records and the wartime experience available on Florida Memory. So this is going to cover every war for which Florida has been a state, right? Every war that Florida has been potentially involved in anyways on the American side. Mind you, this is a guide. It is not necessarily where we're serving up these records. This is going to address things that are not digitized as well. So these records and the records in our collection, there's a few different types of military records. And for this project, for veteran stories, I think about this research as using a lot of the methods of genealogy. Is we are looking for records with the systematic recording of, a data set about veterans. And so we have some of these, and then we also have things, for example, post World War II, a lot of those systematically recorded records are going to be available federally, not through us. So post World War II, we might have things like the State Defense Council's records, photography collections. We might have the governor's correspondence, Florida State Guard things, but not particularly records about an individual. So there's a few different things to talk about there. So as we're thinking about the paper trail, don't forget post World War II. That's the rule of thumb. If you're looking for veterans, service records past that time, you're going to be inquiring with the National Archives. There's a National Personnel Records Center where a lot of these stories are kept. Now, World War I and further back, that's where the state archives can really start to help. So one of the best sets of data we've got, for example, would be our World War I service cards. So this is a collection which is fully digitized, completely searchable on Florida Memory by branch, searchable by name, service number, hometown, county, anything like that. And these cards are a wonderful resource. This is every veteran of World War I who lived in Florida, and is in fact the result of a WPA project done in the 1930s. And we digitized it, but it's their work and it's still really good. This is going to be kind of a condensed service record. It's going to show for each individual who they were when they enlisted, any remarks, certain highlights of their service. I hesitate to call this a highlight, but if maybe they're wounded or if they've received a commendation, let's say more like that, that will all appear here. And certainly it is sortable and searchable by a certain place. So if you're looking to find information about veterans in your hometown, this would be a great way to start. Another perfect example will be our Florida militia muster rolls. These go all the way back to 1826. This will be, this does exclude regular Army, but if we're talking about Seminole War, things like that, your Florida veterans will be here. If they were maybe volunteers, called up for militia service, as was a lot more common in those days, kind of on the Florida was at that point a frontier area. There's going to be kind of a twin of this at the federal level, but the resources here as well. A final example in really one of the sharper differentiations between what we would have at the state level and what exists at a federal level will be Confederate pension files. Now, veterans who fought for the United States in the Civil War, their pension was handled by the federal government, along with any other Army pension it would have been. In Florida, there's another class of veterans for whom they fought on the Confederate side of the Civil War. Those pension files tended to be administrated by whichever state that veteran happened to live in after the fact. So Florida's Confederate pensions will include veterans who maybe lived somewhere else at the time and then moved to Florida later in their life. One interesting highlight on these Confederate pensions, it was fairly common for a pensioner would maybe remarry later in life a fairly young woman so that she could continue to receive that pension the rest of her life. And in fact, I think Florida was paying out Confederate pensions into the 1990s or something like that. So these records can come a little forward in the timeline, more forward anyways than you would expect. So there are different ways of finding this paper trail for veterans who are no longer with us, veterans who cannot share their stories directly. These are all great resources to find a name, right? Get a good starting point, put together your list of people whom you need to research a little more fully.
So I'll just kind of, for time's sake, I'll try to kind of move relatively quickly, but I'll show you kind of what our program looks like, how we capture the interviews, and then what we do with them. And I'll show you also some short clips of interviews that we put out for public accessibility on social media, how those look compared to the long form interviews, and that'll be about it. So I'm going to go ahead and screen share. And what I have here is a page on our website. So when a veteran is interviewed for the Florida Veterans History Program, their full interview goes up onto our YouTube channel, and then that is embedded on our website. So you can see kind of the breakdown of Department of State website all the way down to the Veterans History Program, stories, and then each individual veteran gets a page. So here you can see Ed Gifford's page, and he's a American Legion post commander that I work with out in Monticello, Florida. He's been he's a leader in his community in his veterans community, and is just a great guy. But I interviewed him back in February, and so on his page I have kind of a short bio of him. We have his interview embedded from YouTube.
The Major John Leroy Haynes Florida Veterans History Program was.
You can see that's about a 2-hour interview. We sat down and talked for quite a while. I have a link to a transcript of his interview. And then where'd my page go? Oh, right here. And then sort of a breakdown of the interview summary. So that's more or less what the page looks like. That is kind of public facing from our website's end, where the most sort of complete results of that interview are published. Then we have on our social media, we put out kind of short clips anywhere between 30 seconds and like 3, 4, or 5 minutes, somewhere in there. Clips from the interviews, and I can show you a couple of examples of those. I think the first one I'm going to show you is one of my favorites. This is my interview with Charlie Reichert, also a resident of Monticello, Florida, and he recently celebrated his 100th birthday. Charlie is a World War II Navy veteran, and I'll show you a clip of him talking about a ceremony that he underwent during his time in the Navy.
We had a pretty good time going over. We went across the equator and we were initiated into the Shellback Society. That's Shellback is the name for somebody who has crossed the equator. And then we also crossed the international date line. When we crossed the equator, they had the ship's company initiated the passengers, and the passengers were like me, would be dumped into a tub of water, a big tub of water on deck. You sat down on this chair, and they jerked the support out from under the chair. You fell into the water. They also put they clipped everybody's hair right down the middle to the skin. You had hair on each side, but none in the middle. So the ship's crew had a pretty good time of it.
All right, and then one other clip that I'd like to show you today that I also found just very historically significant, interesting, kind of stuck with me, is a conversation I had with Juan Duenas in Miami. This is at the Miami Military Museum. So you can see in that first clip, I went out to Charlie's home and we did an in-home interview with Juan. We did our interview at the Miami Military Museum. And Juan is talking about how he was a recipient of Operation Vedra, which was one of the largest operations of bringing over unaccompanied minors from Cuba following the Cuban Revolution to the United States. And so this is him reflecting on that.
I decided to be in the military because to give something back to this country they gave my parents. They gave me freedom. So I decided to raise my right hand and give back to this country what the country gave me. And one thing was freedom. And I'm very proud to say that that was my dedication, to give something back to this country.
So that's just a couple examples of just moments that stood out to me from our interviews that we've done. Got a question in the chat about how were the transcripts developed? Thank you, that's a great question. So that's kind of something I'm still playing with. I've got a new piece of software that I'm going to be looking at in the coming days and weeks. But essentially, I use an AI tool called NoteGPT, which pulls the YouTube transcript and gives it to me in a kind of a more manageable file, and then edit that, just add in punctuation and stuff like that. I like to go through it with the video on 2x speed so I can read through it and just make sure everything's accurate, add the speaker attribution and stuff like that. But it's a fairly low tech process still. So that is something that that I'm still kind of developing, but yeah, that's kind of how I do those. I basically just pull a transcript, add speaker attribution, and edit them. And I do. There's a lot of, like, I guess we could have a whole long discussion on transcripts, because do you remove the ums and uhs and how verbatim should it be? But yeah, that's what I'm doing for that. So thank you for that question. But yeah, so those two clips stand out to me just in terms of, I think they as a person with an interest in history, they really speak to how these experiences relayed in these interviews, teach us about the kind of historical events that the people that I get to interview lived through. Our setup for recording is mobile. Another question. Let's see. Are there any plans to make the snippets that are identified by timestamps as searchable links, and how hard would that be? So that's a good question. Can you elaborate on identified by timestamps? Like searchable within the program, or what do you mean by making them identifiable by timestamps and as searchable links? What appears below that one example? So those go on our social media page. I'll show you that. So the long form go on our YouTube and website, and then on our Facebook is where I post typically, the shorter examples. Along with context. I usually provide an excerpt of the transcript and a little bit of context about what the example is about. And I try to post one of those weekly, roughly. Does that answer? I'm not seeing the chat right now, so let me go back to where I can see the chat. But does that answer that question? Oh, yes. Yeah, timestamps are in the long form examples. So I'll show that again. So on YouTube, they do pop up as like hyperlinks, and you can click around within the video. That's a good question. I hadn't thought about breaking the long form video out into, if I'm understanding you properly now, I hadn't thought about breaking the video out into smaller snippets with those timestamps, but that is something to consider. But that's not something I considered before. But on the YouTube, they aren't hyperlinked here, but in YouTube they are. So you can click around the video, chapters that way. So I try to always make sure I have, the video divided into those timestamps to make it a little bit more searchable. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. So yeah, our setup is mobile. I try to go around the state, and I've got a 2-camera lighting setup that I can bring out and do in-home interviews, but we also partner with organizations like you saw in one of the examples, the Miami Military Museum. We've done Sumter County Public Libraries, and we're working with Jacksonville Public Library shortly, and so that's kind of how we conduct the interviews. And so certainly happy to discuss coming out to, having a group of librarians here is great because, and library professionals is great because what we found libraries to be a very useful place to conduct these interviews. And so I would be happy to talk further about making a trip to and using library spaces for veterans interviews. But that's an overview of the program. So I'm happy to take more questions, but with that, I'll kind of step back and yield the rest of my time.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Julian, for sharing your program and how you coordinate everything with the narratives with the veterans. Does anyone have any questions for Julian? You can come off mute or post in the chat. Also, for any of our guests, if you have any questions for them, feel free to unmute yourself and ask or post in the chat. I see there's one in the chat that came through. we're about to embark on this process. There are so many decisions to be made. How did you decide formatting and such?
Is that one for me?
Yes, I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Yeah. Thank you. No, that's a great question. So, I really stole a lot of inspiration from the Library of Congress Veterans History Project, and there is, I can drop this link in the chat real quick. They have under their program a how to participate, because they do kind of, they do take submissions. And so that was kind of my starting. I've made, a few adjustments kind of as I've gone and found out what this program, looks like independent of that. But that was definitely my starting place, was to look at what they were doing, to look at how they directed people to submit to their project, what kind of format they wanted, what kind of data they were collecting. And I started with that. In fact, I still use under that link is a variety of forms, including your consent form that you need, the metadata form that the Library of Congress collects. And I still make use of that paperwork because one, I do set up my interviews such that they can be submitted to the Library of Congress, because if they're following those guidelines already, I think it's a great project, and I'd like to submit our interviews to them as well. But also because the metadata form, for example, it's very effective. And so I take that form out with me along with our State Archives of Florida consent forms and collect that information. So that is, I think for me, that was what I found to be the most useful starting place. There's also, they have like sample questions on there for interview questions. There's a variety of veterans history programs just in general that have sample questions. And I think I initially just compiled like a big list of all the sample questions I could find. And just kind of studied those, or listened to other interviewers and asked what kind of questions they were asking. What I've found as far as questions go is, if possible, and it usually is possible. I've only had one or two instances where this wasn't an option, and it was because I was at an event and somebody wanted to be interviewed, there at that event. But in general, when somebody agrees to sit down with me for an interview, I give them a call ahead of the interview, sometimes just a couple days before. We just talk on the phone for a little bit, and I ask them a few questions and take some notes so that I can write more tailored interview questions, but they're still kind of the same sort of format as Library of Congress interview questions are. But I find it helpful to have more tailored interview questions and specific to the individual's career, and have some notes in there about when they joined or when they got out, or what some unique experiences they had are. But yeah, so that side is, I think, probably the best starting place I can think of for how to conduct one of these interviews, and how to what kind of information to collect and how to organize it.
Great. Thank you so much for explaining that. I know we kind of got cut off here at our gray building where our power went out. Thank you, Julian, for sharing that information with the attendees. So it's going to be night at DLIS edition for this DLIS discussion. Matthew, did you want to finish sharing your resource? I think you were on the last one, but feel free to start if you like.
Yes, sure. And that's right. I was close to wrapping up when indeed I got wrapped up. And then my laptop dutifully grabbed the Wi-Fi. So I apologize everybody for that hot mic moment. Um, I was going to mention that once you have your list of names, maybe from resources on Florida Memory, that's when you can pursue, perhaps through a database service like Fold3 or something, learning a little more about the individuals for whom you have already found at least a little identifying information for. And then I was going to mention as well that the recordings of the Florida Folklife program are eventually bound for the State Archives of Florida. And that was going to be just a lovely segue to Julian and your work. But you had to do it yourself. So thank you for catching that ball anyways. And of course, where the individual research is concerned, if any of you or any patrons require some research assistance, please feel free to reach out to me and my colleagues at the State Archives. We do this kind of thing all the time. So thanks, everybody.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much, Matthew. Does anyone have any questions for our guests, or do you have anything that you would like to share as far as how you support veterans in your local libraries? We'd love to hear what you have going on.
Hey there, I'll just mention very quickly, this is Matthew with the Palm Harbor Library in Pinellas County, that Pinellas County now has a Veterans Association. And they have been started doing some ongoing oral history interviews, and they put those together actually in a book, which is now in several of the libraries in Pinellas County. So the library hasn't done much in collaboration with that in particular, with the exception of we get to be the first ones to catalog the book. That was kind of fun. But I thought I'd just mention that was something happening in our area.
Great. That's awesome, Matthew. Thank you for sharing that. I see that there's a question, I think for Matthew in the chat. If we do need your research assistance, what is the typical turnaround time?
Hi, Julie. So our typical turnaround time, for most things, we can get you some kind of an answer within 2 business days. That's typically going to look like, maybe it's going to be a scan of the relevant material, or a referral to who does know. That's provided we do have electricity, though. So hopefully soon we'll be able to make that true.
So does anyone have any other questions or things you'd like to share? Doesn't necessarily have to be about what we're talking about today. You can share what's events or happenings you're having in your libraries, programs, any initiatives you are starting, have started, want to start. We have a Zoom room full of experts. If anyone would like to share any best practices on how to get started, even supporting veterans, if you're not already doing so. All right. And thank you, Julie, for the compliment about my background. All right. Well, we have 6 more minutes. If anybody would like to make any last requests, questions, comments.
Hi, Vanessa. I see a comment from Rebecca in the chat.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Katrina. Okay, Rebecca says, the Santa Rosa County Public Libraries partner with our Veterans Services with a Veterans Appreciation Day at our libraries. This is usually scheduled around Veterans Day. Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that, Rebecca. My mouse is also having challenges, so excuse me for the disjointed reading. All right. Well, I would like to thank everybody for joining us. Looks like Rebecca posted in the chat. We have a veteran services rep come and assist veterans in need of assistance or just to visit. You're absolutely right, Rebecca. Really interesting times. But true to form, as librarians, we know how to pivot, don't we? We are always ready. All right. Well, I would like to give a special thank you to our guests who joined us today. It was amazing to hear about your initiatives, your programs, the services that we offer here at the State Archives of Florida as well. Thank you, Julian, Matthew, and Kim for sharing your expertise and experience. And this was awesome. I learned a lot, and I hope that the audience enjoyed what you all talked about. We will be sharing, if we have a chat log, we will be sharing that chat log in the follow-up email. But if we do not, we will definitely share the resources that were shared throughout this discussion. And please reach out to us. Let us know even more topics you would like us to talk about. But until next time, thank you so much for joining us and have a wonderful week. And see you at another DLIS discussion near you. Thank you so much, everyone.